record button. All right, guys, welcome to today's Let's Talk Wellness. Here we are joined with Sam about Healthy Eating 101. Nutrition information shows up everywhere and can be overwhelming. So here we have Sam, who's a registered dietitian and also our very own EHE Onsite Wellbeing coordinator for this interactive session about how to simplify healthy eating during 2021. So welcome, Sam, and welcome everyone to today's session. We hope you guys get some great information out of it. Feel free to keep your cameras on or off. It's always nice to see faces, and we are also keeping the chat open, so feel free to use the chat function too. So let's get talking. Thanks.
Sure.
Sam.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. So, of course, this topic is near and dear to my heart. Studied food for a very long time. And what I love about nutrition is it's so individual to everyone, right? Everybody is we have different likes, dislikes, and even different ways that food affects us and our digestive systems in so many different ways. So today, and what I usually take people through in general is really taking it back to basics, because in so many ways we are bombarded with nutrition information. We see it on the news, well, not really the news anymore these days, but the news, we see it on the internet, a new article comes out, and you really want to be wary of different claims that are made in some cases, where was the research done? So before you jump into a nutrition a nutrition topic or nutrition change, definitely, especially if you have any pre-existing conditions, speaking with a physician is really important, because you never know how things can interact with medications and those types of things. But also, really thinking about long-term, is this sustainable for me and something I really want to include in my lifestyle? So to start off, I wanted to kind of just go through macronutrients. So macronutrients are the nutrients that give us calories. So there's carbohydrates, protein, and fats. So carbohydrates, everybody knows carbs. They're delicious. They're the breads, pastas, rice, fruit, some vegetables too. And I think in our society, in a lot of ways, we feel almost afraid of carbohydrates. And honestly, carbohydrates are the first source of fuel for our bodies. So incorporating carbohydrates in the right amount at your meals and snack times are really important, just to kind of, first of all, give you energy. Protein, we all hear protein. Protein's great for a healthy lifestyle, which it absolutely is. And there are so many different sources of protein. So we get protein from eggs, different animal meats, even some of our grains have protein, which is really cool. So I think I might have mentioned this on one of our last Let's Talk Wellnesses, but if anybody has tried quinoa or farro, can you guys put that in the chat? This is like one of the first few Let's Talk Wellness that I can actually see the chat, because I'm not so far away from it. So I'm really excited to hopefully get some participation. But quinoa and farro, those are really fun ones, and they are going to have a little bit more protein. Quinoa actually has complete protein, which means it has all of the essential amino acids. So there are a few amino acids that our body can't make, and we need to get through food. So quinoa is pretty great. Quinoa, yes, you were very close. It's Quinoa. So that was great. Perfect. Quinoa many times, farro once. I'm curious, Christine, if you'd like to share your experience with farro, because it's really a unique one. I actually have it in my pantry. Before we sign off, I should grab it so you guys can see it. It's a little bit more dense. It does have like almost a chewy texture to it, but I always tell people in a good way. And what's really nice is it has a lot of fiber and protein. So what's nice about those things is if you use them as a base for a bowl, you can always add some chicken in there, or, bulk it up with some nuts, seeds. All of those types of things are going to add a little bit more protein, which is pretty cool. And again, if you throw an egg in there, you got more protein. So the protein really does add up pretty easily. And then fats. So quinoa is the best. Yes, I agree. So when it comes to fats, I always think back to my mom always had the fat-free cookies around. And a lot of times when you think about when they took the fat away from those types of things, they a lot of times had to add other things in to make it taste good. So a lot of times we might have seen the sodium go up or other nutrients that kind of got out of whack. So just being mindful of that, I don't think our society is really afraid of fat anymore. Keto's pretty trendy right now. But I think the reasoning behind that is because it's more calorically dense. So carbohydrates and protein are 4 calories per gram, and fat is 9 calories per gram. So if you eat a smaller amount, you'll still get the same amount of calories if you eat a larger amount of a carbohydrate and protein, if that makes sense. So it's not you can't eat as much of abundance for the same amount of calories. So that's kind of macronutrients at a really basic level. And what I kind of want to talk about next is MyPlate. Has anybody seen this? ChooseMyPlate.gov. Can you guys just put it in the chat if anybody's seen it before? I actually love to use it as a tool just to be mindful of whether it's portion sizes, food groups. So I love talking about this because I think a lot of you guys on the call, it'll resonate with you. Does anybody remember the food pyramid? It was on the back of the cereal box. I always remember that as a kid. So does anybody remember what was at the base of the pyramid? I'm really quizzing you guys now.
It must be vegetables, right?
The base was carbs. Yes. So the base was actually carbs. So Nick got that. Good guess, Cheryl. Because now the plate, I unfortunately don't have a picture of it, but now the plate is half fruits and vegetables, a quarter grain, a quarter protein, and then they have dairy on the side. So yes. And the reason why the carbs were the base of the pyramid is truly because they give us the energy throughout the day. But we also, I think they didn't really consider, they put mainly grains there, right? Fruits and vegetables also have carbs. So it kind of balances out on the plate when you really think about it. And then, so does anybody know an example of a vegetable that's higher in carbohydrate? What comes to mind immediately? Potatoes, peas. Yes, potato. Peas, corn, winter squash. And I always tell people not to be afraid of these foods, that we really can incorporate them in a healthy way. It's just, we have to be mindful of what we're pairing it with. And that's really where the visual of MyPlate kind of comes in. So I always say you'd want to be careful if you're having, and I know this sounds strange, but like potato and pasta, or pasta, I'm Italian, we do pasta and peas. That's where we want to be mindful of the amounts that we're putting together. Because while peas are a vegetable, they're also starchy. So if you're having pasta and peas together, you want to be careful with the amounts for sure. So on the plate, if you can visualize it, it's broken down into 4 parts. So there's also fruit and dairy on the plate. And I know we might not usually get a serving of fruit and dairy at meal times, but I always say you can reserve that for a snack if you want to. So, a yogurt and some berries, whatever the case may be. And do you guys know the difference between regular yogurt and Greek yogurt? Does anybody have a guess? Give it another second. So Greek yogurt's going to be a little bit higher in protein, and depending on the one that you buy, it might even be a little lower in sugar. So before we start, I'd like to it's a good segue into nutrition facts label. So I really want to talk about this because there were a few updates, I want to say probably like a year or 2 ago now. I can't believe how quickly time is flying, but this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So if anybody wants to run and grab something out of their kitchen, I'll give you guys a minute or 2. I actually have a couple of examples. I have Banza pasta. Please let me know if anybody is familiar with this. Yeah, so this is chickpea pasta. So I'm really excited to show you guys this. I have ice cream from my freezer because why not? And then I just have another grain here to compare. These are just steel cut oats. I kind of just raided my pantry before this, so I chose a few different things. Okay, so the most important thing when we're picking up any product, especially when we're food shopping, right, is we want to think about what our application of that food is going to be. So if I picked up this pasta, am I only having pasta? What am I going to pair it with? So just keeping that in mind when you are food shopping, and maybe how you're going to build your meal will help you to decide maybe what product is correct for you. Because I don't necessarily recommend this all of the time at certain applications, so I'll explain. But when you pick it up and you're looking at the nutrition facts label, the first thing you want to look at is the serving size and the servings per container. So what happens is, I'm not going to use this as an example. I'm going to use this because the pasta is in ounces, so that makes things a little bit difficult. So the steel cut oats, if we have a 1/4 cup dry is the serving size, there's 21 servings in this whole container. So what that means is there's 21 1/4 cup servings in here. Now, this is an extreme example, but I didn't have any snacks to pull out of my pantry. We have to go food shopping. If I was going to eat this whole tub of steel cut oats, I would have a stomach ache, but also I would have to multiply everything that I'm eating by 21 because that's the amount of serving size, amount of servings in the container. So all of the nutrients that they're listed would have to be multiplied by 21. So this is more realistic when you're thinking about maybe a bag of chips or something else, pretzels, something that you might be snacking on. What I usually tell people to do, instead of having the bag, because how many times have you grabbed a bag of popcorn and then at you're watching a movie and 5 minutes into the movie, the popcorn's gone. What happens is we're kind of mindlessly munching, right? We're not really paying attention. We're not really in the moment. So what I usually have people do is actually put it into the bowl and whatever serving you want to have. So popcorn's usually about 3 cups. So individual serving of 3 cups. So not a shareable serving, if you ask me. So that you want to definitely be careful with that. So Cheryl asks, why is a serving size never as much as I want? I know. And honestly, it's really about the balance too, right? And we're going to talk about that too. With balancing of snacks, that can make a huge difference because I always use this as an example because it resonates with me. When I was younger, I used to have cereal for breakfast. So let's say it might not have been something super sweet, but if I just had cereal and milk, especially now, like something like an almond milk that doesn't necessarily have a lot of protein, what I'd noticed is in an hour, I'd be looking for more food. Now, the reasoning behind that is because carbohydrates are digested the quickest. So when you add protein, that really helps to kind of slow the digestion, and even fats at 9 calories per gram, they're digested even slower. So what that does is it helps to slow the digestion and it helps to keep you fuller longer. So that's why when we talk about like balancing things out in combinations, that's why my plate works so well with those portion sizes and food groups. Those pairings really make such a huge difference. So I feel like nuts is always a really hard one as well. Like 20 almonds isn't that much, but when you pair it with a fruit, that really helps the fruit's going to add more fiber. Maybe you have an apple, that skin has a lot of great fiber, and you're getting the good protein as well. So it's really a nice balance, and it might stop you from snacking even more throughout the day, because maybe if you, instead of just having the apple or just having the almonds, and then maybe an hour or two later, you're hungry, it's going to help to keep you fuller longer by combining. So that was a great question, Cheryl. Thank you for throwing that out there. Okay, so back to our nutrition facts label. So when you have so here we have a 1/4 cup dry. So if I was to take a 1/4 cup and measure out my steel cut oats before I cooked it, that would leave me with 150 calories. Now, I think everybody's probably by now seen the new nutrition facts label where the calories are written very large. Does anybody know the other big change? There's a couple, but there's another big change to the food label that came with this, this change. So if anybody knows, definitely throw it into the chat there. So of course, when I'm food shopping, I know that oatmeal is pretty much going to be my carbohydrate, right? There's not a lot of fat in oatmeal. When I'm shopping for peanut butter, I expect the fat to be higher because I know that that's a higher fat food. So here we have total fat 3 grams, which it really, again, depends on the product, what you want to look for. Saturated fat, we generally want to keep on the lower side. Trans fat, 0. We want to make sure that that is 0. Also, when you're looking at ingredients list, I believe it came out of Katie. Yes. I'm so sorry. I got really excited that Katie got the answer to the question right. Yeah. So it's added sugar. Exactly. So we're going to get there once I get to the sugar content. Perfect. So exciting. I wish I had a prize to give you. So The trans fat, we really want to, I believe it came out of the food supply already, but partially hydrogenated oils, that was the source of trans fat in different foods. It was in peanut butters, baked goods, some like really random baked foods that you wouldn't think it would be in, but it came out of the food supply because it wasn't safe. But if you happen to see it anywhere, that's a source of trans fat. Cholesterol, we generally want to keep on the lower side. Salt, which is sodium, is everywhere. So we do need some in our diets, but we do want to make sure that we're choosing lower sodium items, especially if we're combining ingredients together for a recipe, because it does all add up. Total carbohydrate, it's going to depend on the product. I know this is going to be higher in carbohydrate based on what it is. So fiber. Fiber is, like I said, one of those things that's going to help to keep us full. It helps our digestive system stay healthy. So the fiber I definitely want to see on the higher side as tolerated. Some people have some issues with fiber, and you never want to go gung-ho and say, I'm going to add all of this fiber into my day all at once, because your stomach is not going to be happy. So I always say, whenever you're adding a new source of fiber, so farro is very high in fiber. If you've never had that before, be careful with the amount that you're eating. Even oatmeal, if you're not used to eating oatmeal, there's 4 grams of fiber in oatmeal per quarter cup in the steel cut. So, be mindful of how much, if you're adding newer foods that are higher in fiber, and always, always, always have a big glass of water when you're having something that's higher in fiber. So sometimes it'll break down to soluble and insoluble fiber, which is great. And then it goes into total sugars. And below there, like Katie mentioned, the amount of added sugars is a newer addition to the ingredient or the nutrition facts label. So the added sugar is really interesting. For a long time, I actually worked in a supermarket for a long time. And my favorite example to use here was the Greek yogurt that I had mentioned earlier. So when you pick up a plain 5.3 ounce Greek yogurt off the shelf, a lot of times the sugar content somewhere between 4 and 6, and that's naturally occurring in the milk. So that's not going to be added sugar. So when you look at fruit, vegetable, and plain dairy products, those are not added sugar. Those are naturally occurring sugars. It's when they add sugar during the processing that counts as added sugar. So one of my favorite examples is this yogurt, right? So if you compare that to a blueberry yogurt or blueberry Greek yogurt of the same brand, you might see 13 grams of sugar. Now, is all 7 of that added? Here's where it gets tricky. Blueberries themselves are not considered added sugar because they're naturally occurring. When they add sugar to it, that's where the added sugar comes in. So you might see the number go up a little bit. You might see it go up by 5 or 4 or 5 if they add sugar. It's about a teaspoon. The other way to know about added sugar is if you look in the ingredients list. So what's really cool about the ingredients list is it's listed by concentration of ingredients. So of course, the main ingredient in yogurt is going to be milk, right? So we'll see milk first. And I always used to joke that sometimes sugar would be before the actual fruit in the yogurt. And a lot of times you'll also see that with like traditional yogurts. They're very sweet. So definitely keep an eye on the ingredients list. Usually anything ending in OSE is going to be a sugar. So sucrose, fructose. If you see sucralose, that is an artificial sweetener. So that is not, that's going to be a Splenda basically. So just keep an eye on that when you're shopping or, when you're grabbing your favorite snack or product, just take a look at that to see, how much is really added. And you might have to put your thinking cap on a little bit, but it's kind of cool to know, we now have a tool to say, okay, how much of this is actually added? So, and of course we want to limit added sugars as much as possible. There's a lot in different snacks and other foods that we want to be mindful of. And then protein. So protein is another item that, we wouldn't expect oatmeal to have 5 grams of protein in it per serving, but it does, which is really cool. So again, that's why oatmeal is so filling, right? You have fiber, you have protein, and you have the carbohydrate. So it's actually one of those foods that's pretty cool. It's pretty balanced on its own. I would just say if you can get a little more protein, sneak a little more protein in there. So I just went through the nutrition facts label and said, you should keep this low, you should keep this high. What is that? How do you determine that? That's so arbitrary, right? So if you look at your nutrition facts label on the right-hand side, there are percentages for the percent daily value. So it's kind of tricky to utilize the way that it was intended. So the FDA actually came up with the 5-20 rule. So if you see 5% or less, that's considered low in that nutrient. If you see 20% or more, that's considered high. So for example, for the oatmeal on total fat 3 grams, that's 5%. So this would be considered a low fat item. The fiber is 14%. So this would be I would say a good source of fiber. Not super high, but honestly, there's not a lot of foods naturally occurring that you'll see, or naturally occurring fiber that you'll see higher than that. It's usually about 4 to 5. A lot of times they add fibers to different foods to bump that number up. Like you'll see different like sports bars and that kind of stuff. So that would be something that would be a good choice, right? Is something that's something higher in fiber. So of course, things we want to avoid to be a good source of something would be sodium. We want to be careful with cholesterol and fat as well. So does anybody have questions on that? You could definitely pop them into the chat. Just for comparison, I wanted to pull up, my heart stopped almost looking at the amount of sugar in here. Oh my goodness. Okay. So what's nice about this label is that they have the amount per serving. So the serving is 2/3 of a cup. And then the whole container is to the right of that. So a lot of times you'll see a serving and then the whole container. So this one is actually for 2/3 of a cup, it's 32 grams of sugar. And I can tell you that probably most of that is going to be added, right? Because if we think about 2/3, even just if you thought about 2/3 of a cup of milk, a cup of milk has 12 grams of carb. So it's a lot of added sugar. I mean, it's ice cream, we know that, but this is where the portion sizes of things are so important. And what I love to do with something like this is I love to try either measure it out, and this, honestly, 2/3 of a cup is a lot comparatively. So even if you took a couple of ice cream scoops, I like to throw some nuts or seeds in there too, just to add a little protein and fiber. It'll, again, just kind of bulk it up a little bit with some good nutrients as well. So we can still enjoy our favorite foods. It's just about controlling the portion size. So just because this says 2/3 of a cup, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the amount that you should eat. That's the other thing as well that you want to be careful with. So definitely be mindful about that. That actually changed. I think about the soda, the 20-ounce soda bottles when I think about this. So I don't know if you guys remember this. I feel like I can't remember how old I was, but I remember that it used to be like 8 ounces for the 20-ounce. The serving size used to be 8 ounces and the sugar content wouldn't be that high. But then they made it 20 ounces and they showed the full amount, because I think what was happening was people thought if they drank that entire bottle, they were only getting the amount that was listed for 8 ounces. So I remember the sugar content going up to like 65 in 20-ounce bottles of soda. And, that's something that someone would drink at one setting. And of course, all of that is added sugar, which is something we absolutely want to limit. So just a side note, a black cherry seltzer instead of a cola is a really nice swap. I know it's not as sweet, but it's a really great substitution. That's something that doesn't have any added sugar, which is great. So being mindful, just because the nutrition facts label will tell you this is the serving size of something, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the amount you should be eating. It's based on what you're putting into the meal, putting into the snack, if that makes sense. And lastly, because I know I have 5 minutes, I just really quickly wanted to talk about this. I can talk about nutrition all day. I love it so much. So who has heard of Banza pasta? Bubbly. Oh, that's a good one too. Anybody? So this is a chickpea based pasta, which is so cool. I love this for a quick weeknight meal. They make a lot. There's so many different kinds. There's black bean pasta. There's so many different kinds of pasta out there. What I love is this has 13 grams of protein per serving, which is amazing. So they do add a little bit of pea protein to it, but it's chickpea based. So of course, if it's chickpeas, there's also fiber. Oh, Shannon uses Banza. Awesome. And what I find, it cooks so quickly, like so unbelievably quickly. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. I'll drain it. I'll throw like handfuls of spinach in it. I'll try to get some sauce in there. Like if I have a jarred sauce that's lower in sodium, that's one of those foods that's going to be higher in salt typically. And then a lot of times I'll just add some cheese, let that heat up, and then you have a meal. It's so fast. If you have some leftover, if you have a rotisserie chicken and you shred some of the chicken breast, you could throw that in there for a little more protein. It's really cool, really a nice option. So if you haven't tried bean pastas, let me know. Oh, Shannon uses red lentil and black bean, which is awesome. And Cheryl asked, what is the fiber per gram? So it's 2 ounces is the serving size. So 2 ounces, there's 4 servings in the box. So basically a fourth of what's in the box is 5 grams of fiber. Sorry, I missed that other number for you. So it's a really nice option. And again, it's not something you maybe need all of the time, but if you don't have a protein source, you need a quick meal, this is a really nice option. Whole grain pasta is also a really great option to utilize as well. And remember, that's going to count in your grain section of the My Plate. So what I'll actually do too is I'll have Jen kind of link choosemyplate.gov to the bottom so you guys can really see the visual. I apologize, I didn't have it for you today. But does anybody have questions with 3 minutes left? I can't believe I made it and didn't go over. I hope this was helpful, even if you like pulled 1 or 2 things from it. I know it was at a pretty basic level, but I really wanted to make sure you guys had a good foundation of nutrition and really what, just some examples of what resources are out there for you.
I'm coming on talking to you live, girl.
Yeah.
So this added sugar thing is just a mind blow. And I think a cool trick with yogurt, because years ago I used to love vanilla yogurt until I realized how much added sugar there was in vanilla yogurt.
Yeah.
Incidentally. But once I got over it with my therapist, I decided to, that's a joke. I decided to, now what I do is I add fruit to it instead of fruit. So I buy frozen blueberries, which are relatively inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
Throw a cup in there and you got a big amount of fiber, because unfortunately in yogurt, that's the one thing that's
yes. I love that.
And the best of both worlds, no added sugars because of the fruit. So that's one of my best tricks. You will see me walking around with a container of sugar and my lips are purple.
Yes, me too. I love how the frozen blueberries also change the texture a little bit, which is kind of cool. And I also say, if you tried a plain Greek yogurt and you said, whoa, way too tart for me, it's also a substitution for sour cream in recipes, so it's understandable. So that's also another cool thing. I remember I made tacos for a food demonstration once and I used the Greek yogurt and nobody knew that it wasn't sour cream. They were like, I'm eating yogurt right now. So it's also another great way to add some protein. But there are a lot of different varieties of these types of yogurt. So just because you didn't like one brand doesn't mean you might not like another. So I always say to try to get the 5.3 ounce of the plains when they're on sale and see if you find one that you like. There are also some brands that have flavors that don't necessarily add sugar, so you can also look for that as well. So there's a lot of options out there in the yogurt aisle nowadays. So definitely keep an eye on that and give it another try if you've tried the plain Greek yogurt and it wasn't for you.
Awesome.
Does anybody else have any questions? No? Well, I really appreciate you guys being here. Again, I hope this was helpful, at least in some small way for you guys. And if you have questions, you can absolutely shoot me an email.
Yep. Thank you guys for all attending. I put Sam's email in the chat for you, as well as the myplate.gov. If you have any questions, feel free to post them or email them. I just want to let you guys know next week we do have a topic on keeping stress in check for 2021. So if you come back next week, same time, same place, Tuesday at 12:30. And thank you guys for attending.
Thanks, guys.